It's awful. It's like, come on. If I'm going to lose it, what I got to have left has got to be at least okay. Right, Dave?
Yeah, I have that problem too.
You look and you go, what is this? Come on.
You got to cut it short because if the wind blows and you don't have that much.
Have you ever seen the guy with the comb over that he starts the comb over, ends up at his ear on the other side, and the wind blows?
Yeah.
And he's got that hair like flying?
Yeah.
Well, my PD at the radio station I worked at in West Virginia when I was really young, he had that. We'd go do like a remote, and the wind would blow, and his comb over, which was like 10 hairs, would be flying, like hit people in the face.
When I had that, people at work called it the swoopy doo.
That's about what it is. And it's so bad. It's just so. And God love the people who do it. They think, ooh, looks like I got all my hair. No, it doesn't. No, it doesn't.
No, they can tell.
No, it doesn't. It's like I had a GM in Biloxi who had the hair plugs. Oh. Looked like somebody just stapled hair on his head. It was awful.
There's a famous politician that when he had those done, he was down at USC for registration day because he was running for office, and I was like, wow, that's weird.
Yeah.
It looked like a cornfield.
Yeah, it's just what it is. It looks like somebody planted like little rows of hair on your head.
Yeah.
Looks awful. And this guy thought he was a studly dude. We used to do these like live broadcasts from this nightclub on Saturday nights right there on the strip in Biloxi. And he'd be in there getting his groove on and on the dance floor. And he was probably like 40, like dancing around with these like early 20s, like, girls. He thought he was studding it up with his hair plugs.
Yeah. So you tried minoxidil and finasteride?
I guess he did. Nothing worked. So he decided, let's plant some hair in my head.
Yeah.
It was bad. All right. So the NBA draft was last night. And here's Adam Silver. Let's get cut forward, Dave. Adam Silver announcing the first pick in the draft.
With the first pick in the 2024 NBA Draft, the Atlanta Hawks select Zachary Rizache from Lyon, France, and France's J.L. Boron-Bress.
Most people are like, who? Zachary Rizache. Yeah. A lot of NBA draft folks think this is a safe pick or the safest pick. He might not have the highest ceiling, but he doesn't have a low floor. Like his bust potential isn't like high because there are some things that could translate to the NBA where he could be a solid role player-ish guy. Like you'll get something out of him even if he doesn't become like a starter or an all-NBA dude or whatever or an all-star. He's not going to be awful, terrible bust. Now, I really don't want to take that description in the first overall pick in the draft. And it's interesting, Frank Mason, who played at Kansas, you might remember him a decade ago now, roughly. Well, Frank Mason III played in France and had this to say about the first pick overall. I played this young guy in France this past season. No way he's the number one pick in the NBA draft, LOL. But I guess, again, that's one guy's opinion, but that's the kind of draft this was. It's not a draft with the Victor Wembanyama's of the world or a lot of guys who are looked at as future NBA All-Stars or All-NBA guys, or it's not that kind of draft. But it was interesting for local flavor in this draft. Like Devin Carter went 13th to Sacramento. And you remember Devin Carter, his freshman year under Frank Martin here at South Carolina. And back then, Devin Carter, very raw offensively, but you could see he had the dog in him on the defensive end of the court. And you could see the athletic potential. You could see what it could be with Devin Carter if he could develop offensively. Well, this past year, he did. He hit like 40% of his threes, averaged almost 20 points a game, like 9 boards as a guard, still playing defense like a beast, and very athletic guy. And he goes 13 to Sacramento. And Sacramento needed him because no one on Sacramento wants to play defense. You want to talk about allergic to defense? That's the Sacramento Kings. Well, Devin Carter's not allergic to defense. That was a good get by Sacramento. Also, SEC guys went. Reed Shepherd, Rob Dillingham from Kentucky both went in the top 10 in the draft. And my thing with Dillingham, it was very interesting. San Antonio drafted Dillingham 8th and then traded him to Minnesota for like picks in 2030 and 2031. Like basically kids who right now are like 11 or 12 years old. So it was a weird trade. My thing with Dillingham is the dude can score on like all levels, but he weighs like 60 pounds. He's going to go to the rim in the NBA and get knocked in the parking lot. That's one thing. And two, who's he going to guard? He's 6'1", and he weighs, like I said, as much as me. And three, he really didn't guard anybody anyway. I don't think he guarded one guy at Kentucky last year. So to take that guy in the top 10 kind of shows you what this draft is. Again, is Dillingham a first-round pick? Absolutely. But with the size question mark and the defensive limitations and the lack of any care of playing defense, taking a guy like that in the top 10, and it was a weird trade by San Antonio. Anyway, also SEC, Dylan Connect, the best pick in the first round by a team. And I can't believe I'm saying this. The Lakers did something smart. Wow, got to go gargle. The Lakers, Dylan Connect fell to 17. And the Lakers are on the clock, and they're showing the Laker war room, and I'm like, they're going to screw this up and draft some 13-year-old from Portugal. Or they're going to do this. With the 17th pick, the Los Angeles Lakers take Bronny James, son of LeBron James. That's happening today, by the way. But the Lakers did it right. They had a top 10 talent fall to them at 17, and they took him. And the only reason Connect fell, because he's 23 years old. The NBA likes to draft middle school kids. So Connect fell because of his age. He might be, him or Dillingham are the most ready to plug in and get buckets for you guys in this first round. And the idea you didn't draft a guy because he's 23 to me is asinine if he's got this much skill. You watch Connect. This cat can score on all three levels. He can take a bump because he's built sturdy. He's 6'6". Yeah, he's not the greatest defender in the world, but at least he tried to play defense at Tennessee last year under Rick Barnes. So you can see at least there is the idea, like, I know I got to get better at this defensive thing. Connect falling that far to me was asinine. This love the NBA has of taking guys who are 18, who can't shoot, who are athletic and have a high ceiling over a guy like Dalton Connect is just, to me, makes no sense. But the Lakers benefited. They did the right thing. They took Connect at 17 again. I thought that was the best pick in the first round. We'll see if I'm right. But projecting and just looking at the draft, I thought that was a great pick by the Lakers. All right, just a little of the SEC local flavor in the NBA draft last night. I will get back in here. Very interesting interview done by the guys on Gamecock Central at the Takeover today with one of the reporters from TexAgs about this whole situation with the Aggies in baseball. We'll get to that next here on the Halftime Show. Terry Ford, David Dare, Tyler Head, till 3 on the game. Well, we're talking about a lot of Schloss talk still from Texas A&M. The guys at Gamecock Central and Tyler with the takeover today talked with David Santop from TexAgs. Let's get to that right now. Hey, David, there, hit the old, start our interview for us from earlier today.
Getting back into the conversation about what's been going on at Texas A&M with baseball this week, we now welcome in from TexAgs.com, David Santop. David, first of all, appreciate your time this morning. I feel like I should just give you the stage. Walk us through what's gone on from your perspective over these past couple days out in College Station.
Wow, that's a loaded question because as we peel back the onion, we're finding out more what was going on. But it was pretty clear that the scenario with the AD at Texas, at Jim Schlossnagle, was taking place a lot earlier than what they led on and what we were thinking. We started hearing some things, just some suspicious things, several weeks before. I had Kendall Rogers, who I knew as a little boy at Olsen Field years ago, who's now become D1 baseball and the kind of the voice of college baseball. Ran into him the first day at Omaha, and he just said, "Hey, are you hearing some funny things? I'm not sure what it is, but there's just some strange smoke around Schlossnagle." And this is after Kendall had come out and had denied the rumors and said there's nothing to it, whatever. Then he started hearing something, and we have another baseball analyst, Ryan Broninger, who is a part-time travel squad coach, and the circles within the travel squads and the select teams, their coaches and folks that they were burning up, they're saying there's something going on, that we're being told to tell our recruits to hold on, that there's going to be a change, don't make a decision in the next 3 or 4 weeks. So, but from the TexAgs standpoint, we would directly ask Schlossnagle, because he would come in the studio. He had a hit with us 2 times a week, and off air we directly asked him, "Hey, is there anything to this?" He says, "No." He goes, "Why would I'm at the super regional. I'm moving forward. Why would I'm happy. I have everything I need here." It's certainly looking like that was there was something going on, and I think that's why there's such a visceral reaction from A&M fans. It wasn't that he is leaving for Texas, which certainly would upset anybody when the rival school takes your baseball coach. I think it was the manner and the way it happened, and especially at the end when Texas announces the firing of their coach on the day of the national championship game. And when that happened, alarm bells went off everywhere, to the point of everybody was talking about Jim Schlossnagle and what was going on, and the fact that he'd been lying to people on the day that you're playing for a national championship. So I think that's what really has set off fans. Is like, okay, I know there's a tight timeline with the transfer portal and everything, but couldn't you have waited 18 hours to set the wheels in motion? But apparently not. And so that's why there's such a visceral reaction here at College Station.
David, Chris Clark here. Thanks for joining us. I got a two-parter for you. Number one, if that game had gone the other way and A&M beats Tennessee and wins the national title, do you think Schlossnagle is still there in College Station? And then number two, I got to get your reaction on his post-game press conference comments, because that was one of your reporters, Richard Zane, who Schlossnagle publicly apologized to yesterday, who asked that question that needed to be asked that prompted that very interesting answer from Schlossnagle as well.
Yeah, no, he was gone, but the deal was in place. In fact, of many sources, we had one with I have a source with one of the Texas collectives, and he matter of factly said, told us the day before the second championship game that if Texas A&M loses, it will be announced on Wednesday. If Texas A&M wins, it will be announced on Thursday. And sure enough, they lost, and it was announced on Wednesday. So, no, that was certainly this was a done deal. I mean, this was what everything that you saw in the last several weeks was planned out, and it was a done deal. So, and Chris, your second question was about, I'm sorry?
The question that he posed, Richard Zane from TexAgs, at the post-game press conference to Schlossnagle about all those rumors, and then Schloss's, reaction to it, where he called it a selfish question, et cetera.
Yeah, and I know that my boss Billy Lucci and, like I said, Roninger and some of the team, by that time it was pretty clear what was going to happen. And in the presser, they decided, hey, we've got to ask the question. We've got to ask that question. And the reaction from Schlossnagle, it was a result of the fact he knew that was the last question of the press conference. And he knew that had he gotten out of that press conference without that question being asked, their plan would have worked. They would have not said anything. They would have announced it the next day, and it would have looked like, this is an opportunity of a lifetime, got to do it. Here, as soon as Richard Zane asked that question, he knew he was caught. And that's why he had such a negative reaction. And also, what's not being reported in the national media is that when Schlossnagle stormed off in Omaha, when you leave the podium there, you come back around and you're walking by front row of the media down below. He stopped at Richard Zane, got in his face, and pointed and said, "I will never speak to you again," and stormed off. So, he was not happy at all.
Wow. Sandhop, great to hear from you, man. This is Wes Mitchell. Do you remember, and I know you were kind of taking us through the timeline there in the beginning, but as we know in this business, like, there's always that first point where you kind of get the little inkling of a rumor and you're kind of working through, like, is there anything to this? And you start asking around. Do you remember how long ago you guys first started getting just that first word where you started having to ask around and reach out to contacts about if there's anything to this? Do you remember how long ago that was?
It was toward the end of April, early May. And it was, I think, the first time my coworker, Ryan Broninger, had a conversation with one of the select team travel coaches who had made mention of, hey, I'm hearing something. I'm hearing that your coach is going to Texas. And that's when the ears perked up. But, as y'all know in this business, you hear a lot of things. And you've got to, when you first hear something, you file it away, and, you passively work with it. But in the case here, we were talking directly with Schlossnagle, and TexAgs has a very good or had a very good relationship with the Schlossnagle, and he was like, I'm telling you guys, there's nothing to it. Don't. So, but that was when our ears were perked a little bit. So this was in the works for quite a bit. Now, when it was formally signed, or when it was not signed, but when it was formally agreed or informally agreed to, I don't know. But this is not something that just popped up last weekend.
All right. That's David Sandtop from TexAgs. Excellent stuff. Talking with Tyler and Chris and Wes about the situation at Texas A&M. And the thing I take out, and Tyler finally showed up. Good to see you. The important thing is you brought subs, so you're off the hook. The thing I got out of that, too, there's so many things, but the idea that Schlossnagle then turned the corner and looked at the reporter, Richard Zane, and said, according to David, I'll never talk to you again. And then the next day, of course, apologizes at his presser when he gets introduced to Texas.
Well, like Sandtop said, he thought he was going to get away with it because he got all the way to the end of the press conference. Mm-hmm. Nobody asked him until Richard Zane asked a very important question, and he knew he'd been caught at that point.
But all he had to say was what he said at the opening of the Texas presser.
Exactly, but he took the emotional response and he stuck his foot in his mouth. And that's why we're going to be talking about this forever.
And so many coaches go to the bully pulpit.
Yep.
They go bully.
But then
They
to
go
loop
intimidator.
around, I'm never going to talk to you again. Well,
Come on.
yes, now you're never going to have to talk
Right.
to him again. But like,
Exactly.
dude, what's the deal?
Right. All right, we'll get back in here. Firehouse Up, text the hour 803-446-100 halftime show. Terry Ford, Tyler Head. Thanks to our buddy Captain Dave for holding the fort here on the game. Time for our Firehouse Sub text of the hour, 803-404-6100 here on the Halftime Show. Terry Ford, Tyler Heads back, made it back from a firehouse in Casey. What do you got there on the old text line, my friend?
Charles weighs in. It says, I forgot to mention this during the worst departures yesterday, but the worst has to be Tuberville leaving a recruiting dinner to take a call from Cincinnati, accept the offer, then not return to dinner. That was when he was at Texas Tech. We mentioned his Pine Box comment when he left Ole Miss to go to Auburn. But yes, there was also the getting the job offer in the middle of a recruiting dinner at Texas Tech and then just never returning to the dinner.
Our guy, Tuberville. By the way, didn't he go into the perfect career for himself?
For somebody with his history of not telling the truth, yes. What he does now fits perfectly.
You know, it's funny. I was digging through those, like, bad departure stories yesterday in The Athletic.
Yep.
And the one, here it is, because I want to get Tony. They had all different sides of departures.
Yep.
One was getting fired, and Tony Franklin was the offensive coordinator for Tuberville, I believe at Auburn. Yeah, here it is. And this is in 2008. Now, again, part of it you always got to say, is this sour grapes? Is this whatever?
Sure.
Well, he got fired, and he thought he was going to get fired, right? So they came back a Saturday. They had trouble scoring. The team's offense was struggling. Franklin was kind of an outsider to the Auburn culture. So Franklin's coming back from the game thinking, I'm getting canned.
Yeah.
Well, a couple days go by, he's not getting canned, right? So he's like, all right. And he went to this whole spiel about what he was going to do different and all this other stuff. So then on Wednesday, I believe it was, he gets a knock on his door, and it's Tuberville, and he comes in to fire him, right?
Yeah.
And Tuberville starts off with, hey, Tony, you know, you're a good guy, and I'm a good guy. And Franklin stops him and says, are you going to fire me? Then go ahead and bleep and do it. Be a man about it and do it. So he gets fired. And he says this, though. Where's it at? A couple things about Tuberville. He says, where's it? This is what's interesting. To this day, Franklin says he still hasn't gotten clarity about what caused Tuberville to change his mind and fire him. He's heard that it could have been due to pressure from prominent Auburn boosters. Another theory is that Tuberville's other assistants, who again, Franklin was an outsider, demanded that Franklin get let go. The quote from Franklin, though, he says of Tuberville, he says, I knew Tommy was a master politician. Being a politician is the best world for him because he stands for nothing, and I don't believe that he ever believed in anything. That makes a perfect politician.
Wow.
Shots fired. Interesting, since we brought up Tuberville. Yeah, that's a great text because we forgot about that one yesterday because we were focused on the Pine Box.
Again, Tuberville has a history of not being the most honest coach. I saw a podcast a former player of his did that was at Auburn when Tuberville took over. And, like, Tuberville sat him down and said, hey, you should transfer. Didn't give him an option to stay or anything like that. And then years later, Tuberville, still the coach at Auburn, came to that guy's school to recruit one of his players. And he's like, you look familiar. He's like, yeah, coach, last time you talked to me, you told me I needed to transfer. There was no other option. And he said Tuberville never showed his face in that school again.
Well, I'd heard a story about a former player who was going to go to Auburn until they met Tuberville. Like a player who was a former college player was being recruited by the previous staff.
Yeah.
And when the previous staff left and then Tuberville took over and Tuberville was trying to re-recruit him, he was like, one visit with Tuberville and I'm going to go somewhere else.
I can see that.
But he wants that national title, though. He wants that national title that Southern Cal had to vacate. Remember, Tuberville's like, hey, we're undefeated.
They hang a banner for that? A Sugar Bowl year.
Yeah. If Auburn would have played Southern Cal that year, there would have been pieces of Auburn laying all over the field.
How crazy is it to even fathom in today's age that an undefeated SEC team would be left out of the championship game?
I know. Think about that for a minute.
Because that was back when that was actually a good variety when it came to the national championship.
Yeah. Not many people. Remember, it was a little bit of controversy at the time.
Sure.
But Southern Cal was so dominant.
Yeah.
So dominant.
Well, that was their second of the back-to-back.
And that was the Brent Fullwood Auburn team, if I remember correctly.
Yeah.
And Tuberville, remember he's jumping up and down when Southern Cal had to vacate. We should get that national championship. No, that doesn't now. That's not how this goes.
When they vacate wins, they don't give the win to the other team.
Right.
It just doesn't count anymore.
Doesn't exist, which is dopey to begin with. But
Sure.
anyway. Hey, whatever happened on the field, it didn't happen.
Right.
Where's that Men in Black pen? Let's wave that baby. All right, we appreciate the text like always. A good one at 803-446-100. We'll come back in here. Football, and more football on the halftime show. Terry Ford, Tyler Head. We're rolling till 3 here on the game. Halftime show with Terry Ford and Tyler Head. It's 1 o'clock, which always means football, and more football. Sponsored by Atlantic Windows and Doors here on the game, Columbia, Florence, Myrtle Beach. Appreciate you hanging out with us. All right, so I wrote down, we did the Phil Steele stuff yesterday.
Yep.
With the projections of South Carolina. Phil Steele, very positive on the Gamecocks this year.
Seems to be.
He has 9 computer simulations. All 9 have South Carolina going to a bowl game. A couple of them had South Carolina actually going 9-3.
It's definitely wishful thinking, but I like where his head's at.
You like that? It's better than
where the simulators are at.
Yep, it's better than 3-9. So yes, that's nice. We're going to go over some of the position group ratings for South Carolina, and one we will tell you is that quarterback, South Carolina was 57th. You're like, wow. It's not very high, Tara. No, it's not. And obviously, because, Tyler, you have an unknown in Lenora Sellers. You have a guy behind him in Robbie Ashford who has been underwhelming as a starting quarterback in his opportunities in the past. And so if you go to the scope of the country, 57 puts you kind of in the middle of the pack, right?
Sure.
But there are folks, look, we all have seen the humongous upside of Lenora Sellers in the little bits that he played.
Yep.
So we sit here in Columbia, South Carolina and go, okay, I get why you got him ranked, why you have that quarterback room ranked 57th, but this guy's got potential. And you grabbed a cut here. It's Cole Topham.
Yep.
And Cole talks about the Lenora Sellers hype.
Down in South Carolina, they talk about Lenora Sellers as if he is on the brink of becoming college football's next quarterback sensation. They say he is like Anthony Richardson with more polish, or quite possibly the next version of Cam Newton. And South Carolina could be very interesting if Lenora Sellers is really that good. Here's what I do know. Every time Lenora Sellers has stepped on the field for the Gamecocks, he has been a sensation. The time he smoothly navigated the pocket and flicked a 50-yard bomb over the heads of everyone. The time he kept the ball in zone read and split 3 Vanderbilt defenders en route to the end zone. The time he was competing for his job in the spring game, scrambled away from the chaos in the pocket and called his own number for a walk-in touchdown. I am fascinated to see what South Carolina can become if Sellers lives up to the hype, because he is the type of quarterback you have 0 regrets about, even if you end up wrong. His ceiling, his potential, it's really that high.
Yeah, and again, that's Cole Topham from Yak Newsletter. And yeah, I mean, look, this is a guy with a ginormous ceiling. There's no doubt. And if he reaches 85 to 90% of that ceiling, you got yourself a heck of a player.
Yeah, and again, we've only seen him in those small little bits, against Furman, against Vanderbilt. Not stiff competition necessarily, but, he went out there and did what you were expecting him to do in those scenarios. If he goes out there and fumbles the ball or throws an interception or looks like he's completely lost, then we're saying, oh, man, I don't know about this guy, but the fact that he went out there and did as you would expect a highly touted 4-star quarterback of his stature and his skill set to do against those kind of teams, then, yeah, that's all we have to go off of right now, but it gives you reason to be optimistic. Like, okay, so we did against those guys. Let's see him go up against a Kentucky or an Ole Miss or something like that. We think he's going to be able to do even better.
We all just want that thing called hope.
Sure.
And there's those little glimmers of Lenora Sellers last year give you hope. Now, again, what's he going to do starting games and, being the trigger man on 60, 70, 80 offensive plays or whatever? We don't know. But we know this. In the little bit that guy went on the field, he made something happen.
And here's the beautiful thing about an offseason like this for South Carolina is you can be as optimistic as you choose to be until you're proven otherwise.
Right.
So if you in your heart believe Lenora Sellers is going to win the Heisman Trophy this year, there's nothing up to this point that tells you that can't happen. Is it going to happen? Probably not, but it might. And you can believe that up until you see evidence to suggest otherwise.
Because the little bit you've seen every time has ended up in a touchdown.
Yes.
So you're going, wow, look at this cat. And we will see how it translates into being the full-time starter. Now, Phil Steele has South Carolina at 57th when it comes to their quarterback room. The number 1 quarterback room, to the surprise of no one, will be Texas. Not only is there Quinn Ewers, but that guy named Manning is the backup there. Number 2 quarterback situation is Georgia with Carson Beck and Gunnar Stockton. Oregon at 3 with Dylan Gabriel and Dante Moore. Alabama has Jalen Milroe. And people still talk about Ty Simpson. We'll see. And then the number 5 quarterback room is Ole Miss with Jackson Dart. And remember, Walker Howard was a huge quarterback prospect coming out of high school who was at LSU and then transferred.
Did Spencer Sanders leave? Did he graduate? Because he was there last year.
I believe he's out. I believe he's out of eligibility now.
Okay.
Or he could have transferred again because that's what you do now.
That's true.
So that's the top 5. The rest of them were Colorado, obviously Shedeur Sanders, our buddy Cam Rising at Utah, Riley Leonard at Notre Dame, which is an interesting one to put in the top 10. Preston Stone is really good at SMU, and no one knows about him. Well, they might more now.
Listen, SMU is going to open a lot of eyes in the ACC this year. People write them off. It's a AAC school, and I mean they were 10-2 a season ago. That is a program that should be able to beat most of the teams in the ACC. I'm not saying they're going to go out there and beat Florida State or even a Clemson, but they could realistically be a top 5 ACC school.
SMU will surprise folks.
Yes.
They really will. Miami of Florida with Cam Ward is at number 10. The last few in the top 15, a couple will surprise you. Georgia Tech with Haynes King.
You know, here's the thing. Haynes King never got talked about. Was a very solid quarterback for Georgia Tech last year.
Yeah, he played pretty well last year, and no one really remember Georgia Tech got it going near the end of the year.
I mean, they gave Georgia they gave Georgia the worst scare, one of the worst scares of the regular season last year, the week before they ended up losing to Alabama. I mean, look, Brent Keith's got him turned in the right direction. Haynes King is very much a capable quarterback.
Virginia Tech is a kid named Kyron Drones, who was a transfer who played really well last year. And again, Virginia Tech got it cooking through the season, too. Number 13, Memphis. And again, Seth Hennigan, I feel like he's been there 10 years. Seth Hennigan's a good quarterback. And Memphis is a very good group of 5 team.
That they are going to be in that running for the group of 5 team that could represent in the college football playoff.
Our boy Nolan in Arizona at number 14.
Yep.
Who came out of nowhere. No one thought that he would be as good as he was last year in Arizona.
The whole Arizona team. That's why Jed Fish got the Washington job, because they just emerged from nothing, seemingly, and set, I don't want to say set the whole world on fire, but certainly shocked a lot of people in the last year of the Pac-12.
And Fafita was not a highly rated prospect. This wasn't like some humongous 5-star kid.
Right.
He really did come out of nowhere. Like you said, like the entire team. And it got their head coach a gig.
Yeah.
So, and they kept some of the important pieces at Arizona too, because they have a very highly thought of a wide receiver that didn't leave either. So we'll see what happens there. Liberty, Caden Salter, another very good quarterback at Liberty, is number 15, running Jamie Chadwell's offense. So that is the top quarterback rooms, and again, South Carolina sitting at 57. The running back situation, South Carolina's at 22 with Rocket Sanders and Attaway and others. So
that Rocket Sanders is carrying the bulk of that.
Yes, because everybody, Attaway was a nice running back, again, in North Texas, but again, you're not giving that high of a rating from a guy transferring in from North Texas.
Sure, yeah. Rocket Sanders goes a long way with that, and I don't even remember what they were ranked last year, but it had to have been pretty low, I would imagine.
Yeah, so you're sitting at 22 right now, and that is, again, mostly Rocket Sanders.
You will take that.
The top running back room is Ohio State with Travion Henderson and Quinshaw Judkins. That's a 1-2 punch, man.
Yeah, that's going to be a dangerous grouping up there.
And Nicholas Singleton, who's really good, and Caton Allen, who's really good, formed the Penn State 1-2 punch. Remember, last year Penn State had to run that well. Oklahoma State with Ollie Gordon's number 3.
Look, Ollie Gordon was statistically the best running back in the country last year. Getting him back for another season is really big for a wide-open Big 12 that we kind of assume Oklahoma State is the next team to kind of take it over. We don't know that for sure, but if Ollie Gordon can play like he did a season ago, they're going to be tough to beat.
Ollie Gordon's good. Liberty is number 4. You're like, what? Yeah, Quentin Cooley and Billy Lucas and Aaron Badgegood combined tear it up. It's a 3-headed monster at Liberty.
And again, you talk about Chadwell's offense.
It's explosive.
They were all over it last year.
He will be a Power 5 coach most likely no later than 2026.
Just these past couple off seasons alone, his name comes up in every major head coaching search. So it's only a matter of time.
Now, again, Hugh Freeze had him a nice situation at Liberty. He
did. That's for sure.
But Chadwell ran with it last year, too.
But he did build Coastal to what they are, which allowed him to get that job.
Absolutely. North Carolina, number 5 running back room, really led by Omarion Hampton, who had a really, really good year.
Because he was injured the year
before, yes.
And
And then he led the ACC last year.
Yep.
Some SEC teams in the listing. Georgia's at number 9. I mean, with that offensive line, you and I can go to Georgia and gain 1,000 yards. Texas at number 10. They did lose their top talent, but they have a bunch of guys coming back. Texas A&M at number 11. Le'Veon Moss, very highly thought of, had a solid year last year. Ole Miss at 13. Even though they lose Judkins, they still have a ton of talent in running back. So that's some of the other SEC schools in the top 15. Wide receivers, Phil Steele, his individual units. Wide receiver, South Carolina at 28, sir. That one surprised me.
Feel like that is rather generous. Again, you will take that without complaints. But if you told me he put South Carolina at like 60, I wouldn't have been shocked.
I thought if you get in the top 50 with so many unknowns at wide receiver, but you brought in a bunch of guys who've been productive in other places, and you have a depth of those guys through the transfer portal, and I think that's why that builds South Carolina up in the top 30.
Yeah, absolutely. And as we talked about yesterday, you've lost your top 5 reception leaders from a season ago. Harvard's the leading wide receiver that you get back, which tells you how little that you're returning at that spot. So, yeah, a lot of question marks still, but it's a lot of confidence from Phil Steele.
Absolutely. At wide receiver, Oregon's number 1. I mean, they have a loaded wide receiver room with Tez Johnson, Gary Bryant, Evan Stewart transfers in from Texas A&M. They have an NFL caliber tight end, Terrence Ferguson. Number 2 is Missouri. Luther Burden leads the way there. Phenomenal player.
Right.
Luther Burden. Ohio State's number 3 because they always have wide receivers. Ole Miss is at 4. They got 3 of their top 4 wide receivers back. Obviously, they're adding Juice Wells. So Ole Miss at 4. Southern Cal's at 5. Zachary Branch finally gets his turn to step up there. Oklahoma's at 6 from the SEC. Other SEC schools in this mix is LSU, even though they lost 2 guys in the first round of the NFL draft. LSU's like Ohio State.
Yeah.
They've always got wide receivers.
For sure.
LSU will be at 12. Then offensive line. South Carolina did not rate in the top 68.
Ooh.
On the offensive line. And I'm triple checking it right now to make sure I didn't miss it. The number 1 offensive line, Georgia. Number 2, Texas.
Yep.
Then you have 3, Oregon, 4, Oklahoma State, 5, Florida State. Other SEC offensive lines, LSU at 6, Tennessee at 8, Ole Miss at 13, and Clemson checked in at 9. Nowhere in here is South Carolina.
I mean, are you shocked?
No, not at all. Honestly, I started looking for them after 50. I really did. And then I said, well, maybe I'm off. Maybe they're giving it. No, they're not ranked in the top 68. Now, obviously, we know this is the biggest question mark on the football team.
Mm-hmm.
And can you fix an offensive line that last year struggled? A lot of injuries, performances, a lot of below average performances, a lot of guys that were playing that shouldn't have played because of injury. It was a mess. You got a lot of depth there now and experience, and hopefully you can put together a solid offensive line, because that's the key to this whole thing. We talk about Lenore Sellers all day. Can Lenore Sellers block for himself?
No,
not at all. So the key to this offense is how good this offensive line can be. At least be solid, Tyler. I mean, you don't have to be Georgia, but just don't be what you were last year.
Right.
So, not ranked by Phil Steele. We'll get you the the rankings. These are much better, by the way. Phil likes the South Carolina defense.
He's optimistic.
We'll get into that next. Football in the 1 o'clock hour, sponsored by Atlantic Windows and Doors here on The Game. We're doing football in the 1 o'clock hour here on the game, sponsored by Atlantic Windows and Doors. Craft beer card, you can still get yourself one. $360 worth of craft beer for $79. Go to 1075thegame.com, click on Sweet Deals. Then you also hit the click on the craft beer passport and start drinking. Like we said, we'll supply the tour guides, Elijah and Jay, to help you in your craft beer journey.
There you go.
Again, 1075thegame.com, click on Sweet Deals. All right, we are rolling through Phil Steele's individual unit grades. Offensively, South Carolina, top 25 in the running back room, top 30 wide receiver room. 57th at quarterback and not rated on the offensive line out of the top 60, 70 teams. All right, to the defensive side of the ball, Phil likes South Carolina pretty much over here. Defensive line, the Gamecocks are ranked number 20. Mm-hmm. Makes sense, a lot of depth, a lot of veterans coming back, veterans in the portal. 20 makes sense. This should be a good offensive line, a defensive line this year.
Right.
Number 1 defensive line's Ohio State. Number 2, Penn State. 3, Utah. 4, Michigan. 5, Nebraska. Which is interesting, Nebraska up that high. Other SEC squads in the rankings, Texas A&M is at 6, Georgia's at 7, Tennessee's at 8, Kentucky's at 9, Ole Miss is at 10, Alabama's at 14. So that's the defensive line. Again, South Carolina getting some love at number 20. Linebackers, South Carolina, 21st. Think about that. Look at the linebacker position last year, and now look at a linebacker room that's ranked 21st in the country.
And that's another one that, we talk about with all the veteran experience. Obviously, Debo coming back for another year, and, you bring in, or Bay Martin Scott coming back, somebody that, progresses season 1 long last year. You bring in Demetrius Knight and Bengali Kamara, 2 guys that have been around the game for a while, played a lot of football, particularly, Demetrius Knight, an all AAC selection last year at Charlotte that was, truly all over the field. And while you didn't want to lose Pup Howard or Stone Blanton, as Stone Blanton was a mainstay of the defense for a couple seasons, and Pup Howard had a lot of upside potential and what his career could be here. I feel like you kind of look at what you replaced those guys with and definitely feel like you took a step forward in that regard. Not to mention the guys like Wendell Gregory, J.R. Johnson, the true freshmen, linebackers that are going to come in. And are they going to be a part of this rotation right away? Maybe, maybe not. But there's definitely a lot of hope that those guys are going to be great going forward as well.
It's just a depth of guys now. Before, you didn't have depth.
Well, Debo Williams never left the field last year.
I know. It's crazy. Last year. Just the depth you have this year compared to last year. And like you said, it's veteran depth.
Right.
What Knight, Kamara, guys like that bring to the table to go with Debo coming back again. Like you said, you sprinkle in the freshmen. You've got Bam Martin Scott. We don't even talk about who really played well the last month of the year.
Yep.
So linebacker for South Carolina at number 21. Iowa has the best linebacker crew in the country going into the year, according to Phil Steele. Oklahoma from the SEC at number 2. Georgia's at 3. Texas at 4. Oklahoma State at 5. Penn State at 6. Oregon's at 7. Clemson sitting at 8. Then you have Wisconsin, SMU. Any other SEC, Kentucky, and Alabama sitting at 13 and 14. Remind me to talk about Alabama before we get out of this thing.
Hey, talk about Alabama before
Thanks
we get
for
out of this
reminding
thing.
me.
You're welcome.
Appreciate it. All right, now the defensive backs. South Carolina, you would think, okay, you've got Eamon Warrior, you got Smith, you got Kilgore, you got Fortune.
Yep.
You got a bunch of experience coming back. Now, again, the safeties / nickels struggled in coverage last year.
Yep.
And you have a question mark at the other corner. Well, South Carolina ends up at number 29 in the defensive back rankings. But again, it's top 30. That's not bad.
Nope.
So your defense is in the top 30 in all 3 units defensively, which tells you that Phil Steele believes the South Carolina defense, what you saw in November, will be closer to who they'll be this year than what you saw in September and October.
Right.
According to Phil Steele's computer projections. Ohio State has the best defensive backs. According to Phil Steele going into the year, Oklahoma's number 2 in DBs, Georgia 3, Clemson 4, Iowa 5, Notre Dame, Florida State, Michigan, Penn State, and Bama round out the top 10. Here's Oregon again at 11, Wisconsin 12, NC State at 13, and Kansas State at 14. Then you get to special teams, used to be a staple, obviously, under Pete Limbo. South Carolina's special teams sitting at 26th this year. Alabama at number 1 in special teams.
That's a far cry from what Alabama special teams used to be, that's for sure.
I know.
You know, and we talked about this so much last season. Carolina's special teams were not great last season. There were bad snaps. There were missed kicks. There were, I think, a muffed punt or two.
And they didn't get those wow plays they typically do. Yeah.
We waited all season for a touchdown from special teams until the Vanderbilt game.
Yep.
You know, it just was not up to the standard of what you expect a Shane Beamer or Pete Limbo coach special teams unit to be like. And I do think, you know, they're going to get a lot of benefit of the doubt coming into the season. That being said, we still have a question at what kicker's going to be like, which it seems like Alex Herrera is going to be the guy. But here's the thing. He's been around for 6 years and has never kicked a field goal in college. Like, I'm not saying I'm sitting here the most confident in the world about that.
We've had you and I have had this conversation. I remember sitting doing the spring game with Wes and Chris.
Yeah.
And I know South Carolina's got a great lineage of kickers.
Sure.
And I think Gamecock fans just go, hey, don't worry about it, Ford and Head. We always got a kicker. Don't worry about it. But to me, it is a question mark going in until you see Alex Herrera make kicks in a regular season game that matters.
Right.
I mean, Mitch Jeter, he was killing it for 2 years. Missed, one kick in 2 years.
Which made him that much more sought after by Notre Dame.
Exactly. So we shall see. Plus, losing Pete Limbo. Nothing against Joe DeCamillis, who was a phenomenal special teams coach in the NFL. But Pete Limbo did fine work here, and it got him a head coaching job. All right, Alabama, like I said, number 1 in special teams. Texas is 2, Georgia 3, Auburn 4, obviously all SEC. Then Michigan 5. Virginia Tech, because it's Virginia Tech, at number 6. Louisiana, not LSU, but Louisiana 7th, Southern Cal 8th, Penn State 9, Iowa 10. Any other SEC schools not in there from 10 to 14?
Iowa only 10th. I feel like that's a snub.
That's disrespectful.
Because that's their whole thing.
Exactly.
It's like we go 3 and out, we punt, and then we play defense.
And we get a fumble return for a touchdown. And we win the game 7-3.
That's right.
Iowa is, 10th in special teams, 5th in defensive backs, number 1 in the linebacker room, and defense. They're not ranked in the top 15 on the defensive line. They are 6th. No, that's Iowa State. Iowa's defensive line is not ranked in the top 15. Interesting, or at least I missed it. Let me see if I missed it. Let me look through it again. Yep, 13th. I'm sorry. So 13th defensive line, 1st linebackers, 5th in the secondary, 10th in special teams. Want to go over all those great offensive rankings?
Oh. Was it 15 points a game last season?
Yeah, awful. Now, offensive line-wise, that's been a staple of Iowa football as well. I don't see the offensive line in the top 15. They are 41st on the offensive line. Wide receiver-wise, they are they ranked? They might not be ranked at wide receiver. I don't see them. And let's see, the running back room, maybe that's ranked? Yeah, 39th. And quarterback, I don't believe we're going to see that. Not ranked at quarterback either.
And
no, 47th quarterback.
That's very generous. So much of the blame was put on Brian Ferentz for how bad the offense was. But when you look at the history of Iowa offense in Kirk Ferentz's tenure since 1999, it's never been great. Like this is a program issue, not just a coach issue.
It's always been serviceable.
Sure.
But now it was abysmal.
My thing, though, with how good they played defense and special teams, if they had half of the offense that Georgia, Ohio State, whoever at the top of college football had, they'd be unbeatable.
I've said what Kurt Ferentz has done the last few years is a crime.
Yeah.
By leaving his son in there as the offensive coordinator. If you were to put together, like you said, just a solid offense, you might have been in the college football playoff because your special teams and defense were so good.
Without a doubt.
So sad. I will kind of give some thoughts on the position rooms, according to Phil Steele, at South Carolina and around college football. We'll get to that next. Halftime show, Terry Ford, Tyler Head. We are going till 3. It's football in the 1 o'clock hour, sponsored by Atlantic Windows and Doors on the game. just give the men's clinic a call. If you just don't feel right, you're off. You're not as strong as you used to be. You don't bounce back from exercise. You're always sore. You can't sleep. You don't know where you leave anything anymore. Your memory's gone. That's a medical term. Maybe you have a lack of drive in life. You just don't feel right. And you're worried about it because you're a guy and you're concerned. And I don't know what's wrong with me. Oh, no. Do I have some kind of awful thing that you get when you're getting older? It might just be low testosterone. One way to find out, you call 803-875-MENS. Set up a free confidential consultation with Dr. Dan and the staff at the Men's Clinic of South Carolina. If they think it could be low T, they'll do lab work. If it comes back low testosterone, they'll put you on a program. It's specialized just for you to get you back to being you again. Just make the call. It's a free consultation. 803-875-MENS, Men's Clinic of South Carolina. What you're talking about and we're talking about is football in the 1 o'clock hour, sponsored by Atlantic Windows and Doors here on the game. We've been digging through this Phil Steele yearbook because it's awesome. And we were looking at the position grades, like each position room in college football. Again, South Carolina, good defensive marks, top 30 on defensive line, linebackers, the secondary, and special teams. Offensively, top 30 at wide receiver, top 30 at running back. Offensive line not rated in the top, was it 70? And the quarterback position rated at 57th, because again, those are question marks. And the offensive line being the most gigantic question mark on the team, which really surprises no one.
Right.
Now, if we look at, open it up a little bit, Tyler, and let's look at powerhouse teams in the country. It feels like Georgia and Ohio State in Phil Steele's unit grades show you why a lot of people look at them as the two best teams in America. Georgia is pretty much in every top 15 except wide receiver, and they're sitting at 16th at wide receiver. Ohio State is also in every position group except special teams and quarterback. So basically what Phil Steele's computer is telling you that a lot of what Ohio State is going to do will depend on if Will Howard's as good as everybody hopes Will Howard's going to be, the Kansas State transfer.
Right.
That's kind of where that's at.
Right.
And these projections also tell you that Ohio State better beat Michigan. Just saying. Because Ohio State, just by computer projections, I know the game isn't played by computers, they look like a much better team than Michigan this year.
Sure. Well, Michigan, gosh. I mean, we want to give them the benefit of the doubt from obviously winning the national championship, but I mean, if they went 7-5, would you sit there with your mouth open in shock?
Yeah, I'm expecting 7-5, 8-4.
There's our bulletin board material.
9-3 tops. I just think they're going to go back to being Michigan. Michigan before Jim Harbaugh was a team every now and then had one of those wow years, but usually they'd win like 8-9 games. They'd be good. Occasionally were really good. But their program wasn't. It became. Ohio State was their daddy for a long time.
Oh, totally. No, I mean, think about it. Only a couple years ago, Harbaugh was on the verge of getting canned because he couldn't beat Ohio State. Yes,
took a pay cut. So we shall see. But Ohio State, obviously, their position rooms all very well ranked here. Feels like Georgia. If you just look at this. There's a reason why they're looked at as a top team in America by a lot of folks going into the season. Oregon's also very highly thought of. It feels like Ohio State's biggest competition in the Big Ten will come from Oregon. We'll see. That's one thing to be really good in the Pac-12 the last so many years. It's another thing to how do you translate to a Big Ten that has a whole different style of play than you're used to, and you got to do all this traveling.
I'm optimistic because Dan Lanning is a defensive coach. Mm-hmm. So that's going to be their utmost priority going to the Big Ten, which does play a lot more physical defense. Though, when you look at the Pac-12 in these past couple of years, you look at teams like Utah, teams like that do play some pretty solid defense.
Utah played some D. I think Utah won that championship multiple times on the strength of they played more defense than Oregon or Washington.
You went into Utah's house, they're going to smack you around for 4 quarters.
You might win, but you're going to be in pain.
Yeah, it's not going to be easy by any means. So it's not like the Pac-12 was devoid of that. On the other end of that, you do have the Southern Cals that couldn't have bothered to try and tackle anyone.
Well, Southern Cal thought it was two-hand touch.
Yeah.
Nobody said, it's tackle. Oh, we didn't know. I mean, Oregon obviously is highly rated at quarterback. Number 16 in the running back position, just outside the top 15. Their wide receivers are ranked number 1. Offensive line is in the top 3. Defensively, their defensive line is not in the top 15. Their linebackers are, and I believe their secondary, was their secondary in the top 15? Yes, their secondary is in the top 15. Special teams-wise, they're 20th. So Oregon's another squad that looks very good in this whole scenario.
Yep.
Now, Clemson's defense looks good as we go locally here real quick. Their defense is ranked pretty good. Defensive backs, Clemson's in the top 15, also linebackers and D-line. Offense is where there's a problem, to the surprise of no one who's paid attention. Not in the top 15 on the O-line or at wide receiver or at running back, I don't believe. Let me double check. No, and obviously not at quarterback. So there doesn't take a genius to figure out the problem that they saw at Clemson from last year to this year.
Right.
I'm trying to think of another. Let's go to Florida State real quick. Because obviously, I mean, quarterback, they're going to have a huge question mark. We know that.
Florida State, I mean, they got DJU.
Like I said, Florida State has a huge question mark at quarterback.
Now, he was better last year at Oregon
But he
State.
still wasn't that great.
Yeah.
You know, his missing receiver rate was one of the worst in America last year.
Uh-huh.
He was just better. He was in a better offense last year. That's all.
He was, and his numbers last year were similar to what he had at Clemson the year before, but by the eye test, he looked more comfortable. He kind of looked like a chicken with his head cut off at Clemson. Like, he seemed lost at times.
And of course, it was just DJU.
Yeah.
Anyway, 33rd is the quarterback position at Florida State, according to Phil Steele. Running back wise, Florida State. Well, really, Miami is in the top. What was it here? Top 10 running back room, because again they picked up the Oregon State running back who was really good, and Miami made it 10th with the quarterback position. Miami 11th at wide receiver, 7th on the offensive line, defensively 12th on the D line. Linebacker-wise, they're 15th. And defensive backs, did they make the top 15 there? No. 37th. Every other position, Miami is very highly thought of by the Phil Steele computers. Goes back to, okay, we knew Mario Cristobal would at some point collect talent.
Sure.
But then it's, okay, can Mario Cristobal coach that talent to the level of what that talent should achieve?
Mm-hmm.
They had some good years at Oregon, to be fair. Remember, they always found a way to soil themselves at the worst possible time at Oregon.
Of course, and he kind of translated that over to Miami, too.
So right now, if you just look through these rankings off the top of our head, the best position team in the ACC is Miami.
Yeah.
Very interesting. So we'll see. But it looks like Georgia and Ohio State at the top level, according to this setup, if you just look at the individual units.
Yeah, that's where you're going to see a lot of projections. I was reading Athlon Sports bowl projections yesterday. That's what they have for the national championship, which I don't think should surprise a lot of people.
No, not at all. Not at all. And, you know, the individual, where players are individually, we'll get into that too. There's some South Carolina guys who are individually, we'll do that tomorrow, where they set up like in the top, for an example, let me see here. I'm just doing this one off the cuff right now. If you look at running backs, Rocket Sanders, where's he at here? He's at 34. He's the 34th highest rated running back in the country, according to Phil Steele's rankings of top draft eligible players. That's where he's at. Interesting note, Robbie Ashford is draft eligible. He came in at 53rd. Now, again, Lenore Sellers is not.
Interesting.
53rd at quarterback, I should say. Rocket Sanders, 34th at running back. So we'll go over more of these rankings tomorrow with where the South Carolina players sit regarding the draft. Because that's the thing. Look, again, there's a reason why Alabama had all these guys drafted so many picks over the years.
Mm-hmm.
Because they're really good and they win a lot of games and their players go to the NFL draft. Georgia's had that lately. So we'll go over that tomorrow. But, and we'll go, the experience factor as well will hit. Where South Carolina land on the experience rankings. So we still got a lot of Phil Steele to get to. We're going to pick at it tomorrow as well. We'll come back here, football in the 1 o'clock hour. Hit the Firehouse sub text the hour at 803-404-6100. And we appreciate you listening, whether you're in Columbia, Florence at 100.5 The Game, Myrtle Beach 100.3 The Game. Our stream sponsored by Shepherd's Glass, powered by Integrated Media on YouTube, our 107.5 The Game, our The Game TV stream. And also you can go to our app, download it, iTunes, Google Play, at 107.5 The Game. Listen to us, watch us pretty much anywhere. We'll come back, get our Firehouse subtext the hour next. It's football in the 1 o'clock hour, sponsored by Atlantic Windows and Doors in The Game. Real quick before we get to our Firehouse Subtext of the hour, Wes Mitchell just informed me that tomorrow on the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour, our new softball coach, Ashley Chastain, will be in studio.
Yes, for, I believe, the first 2 segments. We'll get to talk to her, and obviously people very excited that she gets to return to her alma mater after doing a good job up there at Charlotte. And if you listened to her introductory press conference a couple weeks ago, very emotional, obviously a big deal for her. And we're excited to pick her brain a little bit about Gamecock softball.
And look, you always hope your program hires the right person, duh. But when it's one of your own, we've had this conversation. You don't hire one of your own, you hire the right coach.
Yes, and
now,
if it happens to be that person, that's even better.
I don't think Jim Harbaugh won in Michigan because he was a Michigan man. Steve Spurrier didn't win in Florida because he was a Florida man. It doesn't work that way. You win because you're a good coach. Yeah. And if you get to do it at your alma mater, double bonus.
It helped that Jim Harbaugh knew where to buy those cheeseburgers, though, right?
Yeah, a little bit. And they, had that covert ex-Navy SEAL crawling around stadiums with his iPhone, whatever. I'm going to miss the weirdness of Michigan now that Harbaugh is gone.
I feel like Sharon Moore might give us some good sound bites. We all know his famous one from last year, that went viral.
They were crying?
Yeah.
He was crying? Because
I feel like he's very much like a hype motivation type of guy. I don't know if he's necessarily going to go down like the Butch Jones route of like Champions of Life or Brick by Brick or something like that. But I feel like Sharon Moore might give us some like cheesy, like coach speaky type of motivation things.
The funniest part last year, that meltdown, crying fit, snot fest, you thought Harbaugh was being held hostage.
Yeah.
It was like...
No, it's like he's not dead.
No, it's okay. Sharon, he's coming back.
Yeah. Between that, when they did the 4s up in the first game, like that might be the cringiest championship season I've ever seen.
It was. It was just outside of Ann Arbor. If you're not a Michigan fan and, whatever, yeah, it was cringy. Just everything that went down all the way through. And of course, Harbaugh is so kooky to begin with.
Right.
And then you had the things that were happening all the way through it and the way they act when Harbaugh was suspended. Like, can we put his face on our jerseys? He's not dead.
We're gonna rename the big house Jim Harbaugh Memorial Stadium. You got to wait until people die usually to give them a memorial, but okay.
It was crazy. It was just so weird. Oh, anyway. All right, 803-404-6100, Firehouse Subtext of the hour. We got there, boss.
Nameless Texter says Liberty is so overrated because they play nobody. They did have one of the, if not the weakest strength of schedules last year, and they did still go to the Fiesta Bowl.
It's the same thing this year, to be fair to the Texter. The Texter's correct.
He is correct.
Yes.
However, this year, the committee actually has to care about the group of 5 to get the pick right. And I've always had this theory, once you get past the top 4, the rankings don't matter in the 14 playoff era because all that matters is the teams that go to the college football playoff. But now, and look, I mean, they just kind of threw a bone out there and said, all right, hey, Liberty, you want to go play the Fiesta Bowl? Here, you'll be number 23. Sure, why not? But now that the group of 5 representative actually is going to be in the playoff, they're going to be a little more meticulous with it this time. I can almost guarantee that.
Okay, I'm looking at this Liberty schedule, and obviously, they've got their conference schedule. I mean, last year, New Mexico State was really good. Jacksonville State was a 9-win team. Western Kentucky won 8. So they're going to get Western Kentucky at home, Jacksonville State at home, and let's see, New Mexico State, that game will be on the road, and they get Appalachian State on the road. So they got a couple of roadies that could trip them.
Sure.
But non-conference, UTEP, ooh. You get East Carolina, yeah, maybe something there. Florida International. Now, I take back everything. Kennesaw State on the road, baby.
Hey, listen, Kennesaw State runs the option. You
ready?
never know what happens when you play an option team.
Do you know what Kennesaw State's nickname is?
The Owls.
Look at you.
I mean, they're from Georgia.
I know. I'm just testing you.
No, by the way, that's the team I'm going to build my dynasty in college football 25. I've already
Kennesaw State,
home of the Owls, Hootie Hoo. They play at the bank. Pretty cool little stadium. It's like dug into the ground. Kind of neat.
Nice. So they will play at Kennesaw State.
Yeah, that might.
But to the Texter's point, you're right. Liberty plays a cupcake schedule. They're going to have a couple of little mini landmines in the conference, and But again, they're a team that could compete for that group of 5 spot. A lot of the people who are projecting it, they're holding the strength of schedule against Liberty, and Boise State right now is the darling that could get that spot out of the group of 5 because of the way Boise State finished the year.
Right.
It was funny. Boise State finished the year. Remember, they fired their head coach and then caught fire and actually won the Mountain West, which was kind of interesting. So, yes, Texter is absolutely correct about Liberty. And we'll see where it goes. But, yes, that schedule, not very daunting for the Flames.
No.
So, 803-446-100. We'll do another Firehouse Up Text Hour coming up. Real quick, I want to hit this in football. We talk about how pathetic the Panthers are and how bad the owner is and all this other stuff, and the fact that Dave Canales, we don't know if he's going to be a good head coach or not. We just know this. Here's a list of teams that were chasing Dave Canales to be a head coach. Carolina Panthers, Carolina Panthers, Carolina Panthers.
Right.
But Adam Thielen said one of the strengths of Canales is his confidence and intentionality. He's very intentional about everything he does. Everything has a purpose and a plan, and he has confidence and intensity, a calmness about him, but also a passion. He's very unique.
Well,
so there you go.
Go out there and prove it.
But again, what's Thielen going to say? Why the hell we hire this guy? What a disaster. All right, we'll get to hear what's trending at 2 next on the Halftime Show. never plays air keyboards. It's air guitar, air drums. It's never. I've never seen anybody play air keyboards. I was just having a little fun with that now. A little air keyboard action.
Air keyboard, no. Air piano, yes. You know, if you're listening to like Billy Joel, Elton John, I feel like the air piano is kind of a thing.
Maybe. I was just listening to that at the beginning there with the Who.
Yeah.
Figured nobody ever just does air keyboards.
You could start the trend.
Air bass. Every now and then you see somebody doing their air bass.
Just slowly picking a chord at a time. What are you doing,
like
man? I'm an air bass player.
Air tambourine doesn't really happen.
Air triangle.
Halftime show, Terry Ford, Tyler Head. It is what's trending at 2, sponsored by Traditions Fine Jewelry and Gamecock Traditions. We didn't really get into this much because we've been and we're going to get back to the Schlossnagle thing, and I should have told you this during the break, and I apologize. We're going to get this cut here from Aaron Fitt from the postgame show yesterday about who the new A&M coaching who the targets might be for A&M. Mm-hmm. We'll get to that in a minute. But sifting back to South Carolina, a couple of pitching gets in the portal for baseball over the last few days, both lefties. Like I said, both from the SEC. Jarvis Evans from Georgia the other day.
Yep.
Again, the numbers don't wow you. An ERA of over 5, last year and career-wise. He's walked a few too many people. Got arm talent, though. It's just it hasn't all come together for him. The other one's very interesting. The Wyatt Evans of Tennessee. Transferring in, did not pitch at all last year. And in 2023, he had a weird arm issue where he'd be fine, then he wouldn't be fine. Then he'd be fine, then he wouldn't be fine. And finally, at the end of 2023, he met with Tony Vitello and basically decided to shut her down for the rest of 2023 and then didn't pitch in 2024. Mm-hmm. Now, as a freshman, Wyatt Evans, he had a heck of a freshman year. 16 games, 2.25 ERA, opponent batting average of 211. You ready for this? You want to hear a ratio? 3 walks, 22 strikeouts.
That's a pretty good ratio.
So, and I'm reading an article that popped up. I did a little deep diving on this. Basically, he felt tightness in his elbow. His velocity started to drop. He went to the trainer, and he's like, hey, something's up here. They did the MRI, came back clean. Ligaments and tendons, everything. It was just a flexor strain. Evans typically throws in the low 90s, but his velocity was in the mid 80s when he was having this problem. All right, so goes through the rehab process, suffers a setback, and this is 2023. Had to be shut down again. By the time he made a recovery, it was early May. He didn't want to burn a year of eligibility for a couple of innings at that point, so he decided to medical red shirt and get ready for 2024. Now, then he says, quote, over the summer, I just went home and trained, got prepared for the fall. I had a great fall last fall. I was in contention to win a starting job or maybe be a main piece out of the bullpen. Got back to spring training, started throwing well and all that other stuff. Got back to spring. Week before the season started, Evans met with Tony Vitello. As Evans put it, they didn't see eye to eye on a few things, which led to him moving on. Quote, the way things ended at Tennessee for me was not ideal. It wasn't the way I expected things to go. Wasn't the way anyone expected things to go. Like the way they handled the situation that happened. But I mean, it was for the better for sure. I'm much better off that I'm not there now. Here's my guess. It was a weird thing, right? It wasn't like you couldn't say, it wasn't like a Tommy John. Mm-hmm. There wasn't any kind of like major ligament tendon issues. It wasn't a rotator cuff. It was a flexor. Mm-hmm. 1 minute he'd be fine, 1 minute he wouldn't. He'd be fine, and he wouldn't. By the time he made the recovery, remember, Tyler, Tennessee was rolling into the College World Series.
Sure.
Early May, he didn't want to burn a year of eligibility, so he decided to go medical redshirt. Now, again, maybe, just maybe, the Tennessee coaching staff, maybe they want him to pitch. Maybe they said, you know what, man, we're going to need you at some point, we think, for this stretch run. And maybe he said, I don't want to burn a year of eligibility. Because a lot of times the disagreements are over, we want you to pitch.
Sure.
Well, I don't want to pitch. I don't want to burn my eligibility. We might need you because, we're kind of in contention to win the national championship. And he'll go, well, I'm going to throw a couple innings and burn a year of eligibility. That's not in my best interest. So sometimes the best interest of the program, the best interest of the player don't meet eye to eye.
Sure.
So then you get to 2024, and maybe, again, the coach in his back pocket is still a little sore.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe he looks at you like, well, you put yourself ahead of the team, whatever it is. But obviously when they had a meeting, it didn't go the way that, Wyatt Evans was thinking it was going to go because he felt he was fine and ready to rock and roll.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe Tony Vitello looked at it like, we really needed you, and you decided to put your year of eligibility ahead of what we needed. Sometimes coaches, and I'm just making this up because I don't know for sure. I'm just going by what he said. And why would Vitello not want a guy who his freshman year had a 2.25 ERA, 2.11 opponent batting average against him, 3 walks, 22 strikeouts in ratio? Because I would want that guy if he's healthy. And if you look at the Tennessee pitching staff this year, the way they had to cobble it together, Tyler,
mm-hmm.
you might have been able to use this arm. I mean, they won the national title, so who cares? But just thinking out loud, there's something there more than what you could bring to the table if you're healthy.
Sure. And you do wonder, by the time that he would pitch for South Carolina, that's 2 years without throwing in a competitive situation. What's that, time off going to do, and how does that affect him and all that kind of stuff. But, obviously somebody that has a good upside potential if he is in that true form to where he was now 2 seasons ago, and seeing how he can slot in for South Carolina next year.
I think it's a good move because, hey, if you get the guy that was a freshman, you get that guy showing up, he was really good. From everything I'm reading, that 90 to 92 can look mid-90s because of the arm angle or delivery that he has.
Mm-hmm.
So this is look, to me, it's a low-risk, high-reward kind of move for South Carolina. He's a South Carolina native. It's just very interesting how things went down from his side. Now, Tony Vitello could tell you something totally different, right?
Sure.
And the quotes I saw from Vitello were all positive about Wyatt Evans, to be fair. But, again, Evans decided, I don't want to throw a few innings and burn a year of eligibility. Maybe Tennessee had a different plan. And then once you get to the next year, your coach might look at you like, hey, man, what was up with all that? You don't know, but there was some disconnect here that led Tennessee to not put him in the plans for 2024.
Right.
After his meeting, he even said, what was it? The way things ended for me at Tennessee was not ideal. Or maybe, to be fair to Tony Vitello, maybe Tony Vitello's vision for Wyatt Evans isn't what Wyatt Evans envisioned going into 2024.
It's entirely plausible.
Yeah, maybe Evans, because you said right here, he said, I had a great fall. I was in contention to win a starting job or maybe be a main piece out of the bullpen. I got back to the spring, and I was throwing well and all that stuff. Week before the season started, Evans meets with the coach because he's going to tell you about your role for the upcoming season. And maybe what Tony Vitello said was Evans' role. Evans went, nah, I'm good. I'm going to move on. Appreciate you. So, obviously it worked out well for Tennessee. Again, they do the dog pile in Omaha. But Evans now gets a chance to start over.
Sure.
So, it's just very interesting. The more I started to read about this, it was kind of an interesting backstory with Wyatt Evans. But.
Yeah, absolutely. And, we'll be excited to see how he and guys like Jarvis Evans, pair up with a Terry Rooney, who's somebody that's been around a lot of different stops, has good rapport as a pitching coach to see, like, okay, here's what you bring to the table with me. Can I get you to a different level or take you a little bit farther in your development to be even better with the skills that you have?
Yep. So Wyatt Evans coming in from Tennessee, and Jarvis Evans coming in from Georgia. 2 lefties with SEC experience. Also, this Texas A&M story, get back to this real quick. Couple cuts we didn't play earlier. Aaron Fitt was on the postgame show with Jay and Elijah. We spent so much time talking about Schlossnagle going to Texas. A&M has a coach opening, and they have 1 billion guys in the portal right now. So Aaron Fitt talked to Jay and Elijah about who the target might be for A&M as they zero in on their next head coach.
I mean, it's bottomless coffers, right? I mean, it's just, incredible resources at their disposal. And that's why, I mean, I feel like they probably could have kept Schlossnagle if it was just about the dollars, but he obviously had already made up his mind, and so it didn't come down to that. But, yeah, I mean, they're going to go big game hunting. I don't know what that means. I mean, obviously, we knew they were interested in Bakich, but I think he's already pulled out of that, from what I understand. I think a name like a Brian O'Connor could be in play. We've heard maybe they're kicking the tires on a Link Jarrett or even a Scott Forbes. I mean, I don't know if those guys are going to leave their alma maters. They seem pretty happy where they are, but you never know. I mean, they're gonna really, I think, inquire on a lot of the biggest names that are out there, and I have a feeling they'll make a splash.
All right, so here's the hot board that I'm looking at here. That's put up by Kendall Rogers. Kendall Rogers put up the hot board. Finally, people were screaming for Kendall Rogers to put the hot board up, right?
Right.
Here's the hot board. Candidates to watch. Brian O'Connor, Virginia. Aaron Fitch has brought up Brian O'Connor. O'Connor, all he's done is gone to the College World Series 7 times.
Yes.
At Virginia. And I'm guessing A&M can pay more than Virginia.
Probably.
I would think, yeah. Now, Link Jarrett, I don't think leaves his alma mater unless a boatload of money.
No, I mean, again, that's a program that's in a great place right now. Just took them to yet another trip to Omaha. Like I think he's got it made down there in Tallahassee.
Cliff Godwin, East Carolina.
If he doesn't show up in your coaching search, it's not a coaching search.
Yes, and look, again, he's been pushing away jobs. He was very much in the mix here at South Carolina.
But like you said, they could really make this worth his while if they really wanted him.
Well, more NIL money at A&M than East Carolina.
Yep.
You don't have to worry about your guys at A&M going in the transfer portal because they can't get good NIL deals.
Mm-hmm.
So Godwin might really be in play here. Dan Hefner, Dallas Baptist. I mean, he's done a great job at Dallas Baptist, but is that big game hunting?
What was that?
Hefner at Dallas Baptist. That's not big game hunting.
Yeah, it's not.
No offense. And really, Godwin isn't either.
It makes sense from the local standpoint of already being in Texas, being in a program at the mid-major level that's been very successful, that he's probably taken it about as far as he can go with it. Talking to our guy from TexAgs earlier today, he brought that up as a point of, hey, this is somebody that they might seriously look at because of the boxes that he's already checked up to this point. Now, again, is that the splashy hire? Not necessarily, but he's somebody that from a program building standpoint, which, again, it seems like Texas A&M is kind of going to be starting over, you might need that kind of guy.
I'll give you another one here. Our boy Nick Mangione at Kentucky. 2 supers at Kentucky.
Mm-hmm.
Under $1 million a year right now at Kentucky. This is an interesting one. Keep that one right there. Rob Vaughn at Alabama. Look, he's 36 years old. Look what he did. He got Bama in the NCAAs. A lot of people love him. He did a really nice job at Maryland. Again, that's not big game hunting. I think the big game hunting target will be Brian O'Connor at Virginia. That's your guy. If you really want to pull a dude in who's done what you want, because again, Link Jarrett wouldn't be bad. I just don't think Link Jarrett will leave Florida State. Unless the money's so stupid that he goes, guys, sorry, but
sure.
Look at those zeros. So that's the hot board from Kendall Rogers. O'Connor feels like the biggest of the big game hunting. Link Jarrett would be good. I just don't think he goes. Cliff Godwin's he's been to supers, not Omaha. Hefner's a guy, like you said, there's a lot there, but he hasn't, he doesn't have that resume. Our boy Nick at Kentucky, he's done nice work in Lexington. And then Rob Vaughn would be that, he's the up-and-comer that everybody likes. All right, so that's the hot board from Kendall Rogers about A&M. We'll get back in here. What's trending at 2? We will get another cut in here about the whole Texas A&M situation and a story about would Schloss be recruiting for Texas while still at A&M. Halftime show on the game. What's Trending at 2 is sponsored by Traditions Fine Jewelry and Gamecock Traditions. We were talking a little bit about the A&M stuff, and we just had Kendall Rogers' big board about who replaces Jim Schlossnagle in College Station. Interesting story really quick, and then we're going to get to, I guess, Billy Lucci from TexAgs. He was on Paul Feinbaum talking about Aggie baseball, but here's a story. Where's it at here? Pulled this off of Larry Brown Sports. Barstool. Very interesting post about Jim Schlossnagle leaving. But former Aggies player J.B. Moss, again, this is just an accusation, said Schlossnagle was using burner phones to recruit for Texas while still under contract at A&M.
Oh, man. This is where the story really gets good.
Yeah. Look, obviously we're going to go, yeah, prove it, because that's what we do.
Sure.
But, man, if that was true.
Because, again, let's go back. These conversations started 2 months ago, before the, SEC tournament even began. Like, this is long been going on. And, again, if you know you're going to leave A&M no matter what, are you going to be putting your best foot forward trying to build A&M's roster? Probably not. And, again, you want to get a jump on making sure you got things lined up when you get to Texas. So would it shock me? No.
I mean, because, look, we know, we've heard from multiple sources state that this thing was a done deal between the final series of the regular season against Georgia and the start of the NCAA's, the regionals.
Right.
So if you're set to be the coach at Texas, first of all, aren't you talking to your coaches? Hey, you coming along?
Yeah. No, Terry. This was all decided on Tuesday afternoon after they got back. Chris Del Conte waited by that cemetery for 5 hours, and that was the first time that they had any sort of conversation relating to this job. And within 5 minutes, Jim Schlossnagle says, yes, by the way, let me call all of my assistants really quick and see if they're in on this too. Had a phone call with all those guys. They said, yes, we're in. And all those guys were whisked off to Austin within, 30 minutes.
Those things happen, Tyler.
That's totally how it happened.
I was thinking, after he yelled at Richard Zane, I'll never talk to you again, he turned the corner and there was Chris.
With his arms wide open.
I just thought about you for the head coaching job at Texas. I never thought of you until Richard Zane asked you about Texas. Even though we're buds, and we've been buds since I hired you at TCU, I never thought about you at Texas till right now.
Well, I know you just told everyone that you came here with no intentions of ever taking another job, but I have an offer for you. Well, Chris, this is the first time I'm hearing about this. You had
an opening?
Wait, you fired your coach?
You had an opening?
I was so focused on the national championship, I did not hear of Coach Pierce's firing.
Yeah. Remember, I left my blood and guts all over College Station.
Yeah, and I left my family, I don't know, maybe they're still in Fort Worth.
They're still sitting in the house going, when's Dad coming home?
Yeah. Okay, all right, hold on. So all this deal went down with Del Conte in the matter of minutes, I guess. Mm-hmm. Did he at any point turn to the family and said, you guys cool with this? Here's the thing, right? You were always told when you're a kid, if you keep lying, you have to create more lies to back up the lies that you've already told. That's where we're getting to with this, because the information's going to come out. Yeah, we're going to find out about these text, phone calls, whatever it is, from the beginning of May. Maybe he was sitting in the dugout during the SEC tournament like, hey, you want to come to Texas and play for me? Like, that stuff's going to come to light. And then he's going to have to keep lying and keep lying and keep lying and keep lying to cover up this narrative or to feed this narrative like, yeah, I didn't know anything about this until Tuesday.
Yeah. If this whole thing, whenever this stuff happens and like these guys get all emotional and scream and yell when we know that they're not telling the truth.
Exactly.
It reminds me, I was like 5 years, one of my youngest memories of life. I was like 5 years old or whatever, and I knocked a vase off in the living room or something, and I broke it. My mom came in and she wasn't very happy. She started yelling at me. She said, "It wasn't me." And I'm looking around. It was a dog. Dog's just laying there,
Okay,
cleaning
dog,
himself.
Dog can't defend himself.
Right.
All right.
And so I'm going, it was a dog, and my mom's like, stop it. It wasn't the dog. There's no way the dog gave it to you. And I'm going this whole big, long story about how the dog did it. And it got so ridiculous. Even the dog got up, stood up on and leaned on my mom's shoulder and went, seriously, dude, come on, I don't have
And
thumbs.
your mom's just like, you done?
And I went,
Got any more?
yeah. She goes, you want to admit it now? And I finally went like this. Yeah, I did. I went on for like a half an hour, man. I was selling it.
And then in your mind, you're having to remember the
Yes.
connections. Like, okay, then I said this, so I have to say this to connect it back to this, and then you're just spouting whatever.
Whenever I watch something like Schlossnagel with when he went after that reporter, I think of me trying to say the dog knocked over a vase when I was 5 years old.
Yeah.
It's the same thing. You scream and yell really loud, you're going to believe me, right?
Sure.
Because I was yelling, Mom, I didn't do it. It was a dog, and let me tell you this and that, blah, blah, blah. And even the dog looked up at me, seriously, she ain't going to buy that, bro.
Yeah.
But that's whenever I see that, like Schlossnagel the other day, my first thought is, okay, you're screaming so loud and so hard. What that guy just asked you is true.
Right.
That's why we were here. And what did we say? Really good chance you're going to see Jim Schlossnagel as the next coach at Texas.
We didn't think it was going to happen that fast.
No, we did not.
But given the emotional response, because again, what are you supposed to say? Hey, we lost the national championship. I'm bummed about it. Want to be there for my guys, whatever. I'll address the future at a later time. That's all you got to say. And we're talking about this because it's still a big story.
But we're off to the next
but
thing.
We're not looking at Jim Schlossnagel like some kind of slime ball.
Right. Exactly. Now, Billy, is it Luigi?
Lucy, something along those lines.
He's the Texags. He is the guy at Texags.
Yes.
And Billy was on with Paul Feinbaum talking about A&M baseball. It might be as big as football now on the campus.
You asked me before how was the Mark Stoops deal was probably one of the wildest days I've covered. The Jimbo Fisher versus Nick Saban day when I was on with you, soon stepping off a plane in Chicago. This all went down while I was on the plane from Omaha after 9 glorious days in what felt like Nashville or SEC country. May as well have been in Hoover. The last 24, 36 hours or so, to me, have moved up to number one. And I'm not sure Jim Schlossnagel coming back to A&M in burnt orange might be as big as when the Texas Longhorns and Steve Sarkisian come to Kyle Field in November. That's what this is kind of quickly building up to becoming. And I can see this coming from a mile or 9 months away. So
it's going to be fun. And we said this yesterday. The SEC schedule gods
please
have to have Texas go to College Station.
Please do.
I will be riveted in front of my TV for that one.
Texas is going to have to hire security, like extra.
No doubt.
Like the Texas Rangers are not the baseball team. The actual Texas Rangers are going to have to escort because the team's probably going to be made up about half of A&M players anyway. They're going to have to escort
that wouldn't
them.
happen, Tyler.
No, not at all. They're going to need a police, heavily armed escort to and from their hotel and to and from the College Station baseball field.
If you're Schlossnagel, can you manage from like your house, remote manage? You know how you remote work today, work remotely? Just remote manage.
Yeah,
don't leave your house.
And it's one of those things because obviously they're in the same state. He's going to have to be careful navigating around because, if he ventures outside Austin and, he's at a restaurant and the waiter's a Texas A&M fan, be
What's
careful
gonna happen
about
to your
eating that
food?
food, man.
And walk in the back. Hey, Schlossnagel's here. Oh, really?
Oh, really?
Pass me that plate, please.
Hey, be a shame if that steak ended up in the toilet, huh?
What a rough thing. Wow. That'd be awful. And the other thing, how many of the players in the transfer portal right now for A&M end up at Texas?
I think there's 7 or 8 total. I'd be willing to say conservatively at least 3.
I was going to go 4.
Yeah.
So we'll see. All right, that's what's trending at 2, sponsored by Gamecock Traditions and Traditions Fine Jewelry and Gamecock Traditions, your official merch outlet for the Garnet Trust. So you buy something Gamecocky, and some of the proceeds will go to the Garnet Trust to help to build the NIL coffers for South Carolina. We'll get back in here. Today is June 27th, the greatest day in the history of the world, sponsored by 1-800-GOT-JUNK. That's next on the Halftime Show, right here on The Game. Greatest day in the history of the world, sponsored by 1-800-GOT-JUNK, June 27th, here on the Halftime Show. Terry Ford and Tyler Head. Here we go. This day in 2017, the Florida Gators score four runs in the eighth, pull away to beat LSU 6-1 to complete the two-game sweep in Omaha and to win the College World Series, their first title. LSU loses for the first time in 7 appearances in the championship game. And remember, now, obviously, if you're a Gamecock fan, you know. There's a lot of talk in these parts that if Florida doesn't win the College World Series, Kevin O'Sullivan becomes the head coach at South Carolina. Instead, Gators win. O'Sullivan is still at Florida. And by the way, O'Sullivan has been to, I believe, 9 College World Series. This day in 2013, we talk about the NBA draft this year is nothing special. Not a lot of wow talent where you think, ooh, that could be an all-NBA guy, or he's got possible generational skills, or, wow, what a lot of really interesting draftable prospects. Nah. Well, 2013, same way. That draft was so bad, UNLV power forward Anthony Bennett was the first pick going to the Cleveland Cavaliers. Bennett was a huge bust. One of the biggest busts of the modern era of the NBA draft. Another one was drafted on this day. I think it's 2001. We'll get to that in a minute. That 2013 draft, Anthony Bennett was number 1. There's a few good players in that draft, but you had a lot of Ben McLemores, Alex Lenz, Cody Zellers, Otto Porter Jr., guys who, yeah, they hung in the league, but they were nothing special. Victor Oladipo was pick number 2 by Orlando. Oladipo was a good player. I think he made one All-Star team, and then injuries just started to wipe him out. But the best player far and away in this draft, and C.J. McCollum from Lehigh was taken 10th, and McCollum's been a good player in the NBA. The best player in this draft far and away was taken 15th, some guy named Giannis Antetokounmpo. Now, I've said this before. The Philadelphia 76ers' idea with, quote-unquote, the process was correct. Hoard as many lottery picks as possible because you're not a free agent destination in Philly, and I think it was 80% of all NBA level players, like all NBA chosen first-team players, were picked in the lottery. So it makes sense. Get as many lottery picks as possible, and you get as many bites at the apple to get all NBA type talent. The whole idea makes sense until you start picking. That's where Philly screwed up. For example, this draft. Philadelphia made a deal with New Orleans. They took Nerlens Noel at 6 and then traded Noel to Philly. So you passed on Giannis Antetokounmpo once. Then you get to pick 11. You take Michael Carter-Williams, point guard from Syracuse, instead of taking Giannis Antetokounmpo. That's okay. Utah made a deal with Minnesota at 14 to draft Shabazz Muhammad from UCLA. And again, Giannis fell to 15. So there were a lot of other teams who skipped Giannis, but Philly passed on Antetokounmpo twice. That was a bad draft. Bad draft. Bad. On this day in 2006, Roger Federer wins his record 42nd straight grass court match, rolling along for his 4th consecutive Wimbledon championship. Federer would break the record he shared with Borg, a 5-time champion who won 41 straight matches. Another NBA draft piece. This is back before the one-and-done rule went in. The Washington Wizards, with the first pick overall, drafted Kwame Brown from Glenn Academy, a high schooler. I believe that was a Michael Jordan pick. Kwame Brown. Might as well pick James Brown. Charlie Brown. Awful pick. Awful pick. On this day in 1988, Mike Tyson knocks out Michael Spinks in 91 seconds. I'll never forget the fight. Michael Spinks had no desire to be in that ring at all. He was just in there for the paycheck. I remember they almost had to push Michael Spinks into the ring. And they do that stare down thing. And this is when Tyson was Tyson. Customato was his trainer. Tyson was a killer at that point. And Spinks wanted nothing to do with Tyson. They do that stare down thing. Tyson's staring right at him like, I'm going to kill you. And Spinks is like looking around. He would look anywhere but at Tyson. Because if Spinks looked at Tyson, I swear he would have soiled himself. And then the bell rang. They're like, Michael, get out there. Oh, get out there. You get out there. This guy's insane. Get out there. 91 seconds it took Tyson to knock out Michael Spinks. But Michael Spinks, he lived. He didn't end up in a coma, and he got a nice check. Well, this day in 1990, Syracuse drafts forward Derek Coleman with the first pick. New Jersey drafted Derek Coleman. Syracuse power forward with the first pick. Derek Coleman, man, that was a talented guy. Excellent college player. Good NBA player when he felt like it. Man, if he would have had a motor to go with those skills, Derek Coleman would be in the Hall of Fame. It's just a shame. Because that guy had talent. So there's your greatest day in the history of the world, sponsored by 1-800-GOT-JUNK. Of course, NBA draft will go on this afternoon.
Yes, and everyone will just tune in to see if the Lakers are bold enough to actually draft Bronny or not.
That's all anybody cares about.
I told you last night, the Hawks obviously had the number 1 pick. By the way, can you pronounce their pick's name?
We ran it earlier with Adam Silver. Ricochet, I believe is the last name.
So, again, Hawks had the number 1 pick, and they had the draft party at State Farm Arena, packed out there. And I saw the video from the arena when they announced the pick. And, they got music and lights and all this kind of stuff going on. But you can see the crowd just, doesn't really react to it because they're like, well, I don't know who this guy is.
I know. Well, unless you're a real diehard NBA head.
Sure.
Or basketball head, and you pay attention to international basketball, you got no clue who Ricochet is. You look at that and go, Reacher. I love those movies.
Sure.
I love those movies.
And then, like we talked about the other day with high school highlight tapes, it's like, yeah, sure, they'll show you a 30-second cut of what he's doing in the French league. And it's like, well, yeah, that's him at his best. Like, what are the concerns? Like, show me him when he's having issues.
Yeah, the thing that made me laugh, there was one video that came up of a guy totally pimping Ricochet to be the number 1 pick. And he's deep diving. Hey, his 3-point percentage and catch and shoot is great and this and that. And hey, when he lays the ball up with his right hand and nobody's near him, he makes all the shots. And he's the best guy named Ricochet in the country. It was just everything I've read by people who cover this and they're total draft dorks and know the international players. This guy was a very safe pick. His ceiling isn't as high as the number 2 guy, Sarr. Sarr might have the highest ceiling in the first round.
Right.
And the Wizards actually did the right thing by taking him. But this guy, Ricochet, his bust rate is lower. And they think that's why he was taken number 1. So it was a very... we were joking about this off the air. Atlanta getting the first pick in this year's draft.
Yeah, that sounds very Atlanta.
Yes, it does. This draft. Now, we talked about Dalton Connect earlier. The Lakers actually did something right. You had to take Dalton Connect there. Dalton Connect was 18 years old. Dalton Connect would have been a top 5 pick in the draft.
Sure.
But he's 23, which, in the NBA, you might as well be 53.
Right.
We were talking about it earlier. It just gets to the point of ridiculous. When you are taking people that are nowhere near as good as other people because they're 4 years younger, I think that's ridiculous.
Yep.
Look, for example, the kid Holland that went number 5 to Detroit. This kid's got a lot of skill, plays defense like a demon. He's going to be a human scab. He's going to roll around the court so much for loose balls. He's got a high motor. He can do a lot of really good things on the court, except one thing, Tyler. He can't shoot.
It's a problem.
But you're going to take him because he's 18 years old, and maybe you can teach him how to shoot. But the guy from Tennessee, who can score on all 3 levels, you don't want him because he's 23.
Right.
Makes a ton of sense. But the Lakers, good pick. They didn't screw it up. I thought we were joking earlier that Bronny James at number 17.
Could you imagine?
All right, so we'll see Bronny James taken by the Lakers today. All right, that's 1-800-GOT-JUNK's greatest day in the history of the world. We'll come back. Firehouse Sub text the hour on the halftime show. Time for our Firehouse sub. Text to the hour at 803-404-6100. What you got, man?
Nameless texter asks, I do wonder why TexAgs wasn't more vocal before the announcement if they knew these conversations were taking place. Instead, it comes across as a passive response to getting played. Well, simply put, the job was not open until hours before Richard Zane asked the question.
Mm-hmm.
You can hear things and keep your ear to the ground on some things that are happening, but there was no job to report on until they fired David Pierce that afternoon. Then it's like, okay, now dominoes are starting to fall. Now we got to follow up on this.
And the other part is, look, I know no one does this anymore, but you used to have three sources.
You got to vet it. You got to see how legit it is, because you hear it from one person. Now, again, you hear it from a Kendall Rogers. That's pretty legit, but still, you got to go through your other streams, say, okay, what are you hearing? What are you hearing? What are you hearing? And again, when you're hearing about a job that's not yet open, you're like, all right, let's see what happens here. But the second they fired David Pierce that afternoon, that's when the ball starts rolling. Like, okay, now things might start happening.
And the other thing, remember, a lot of these type of sites have certain relationships with the programs that they have to always vet themselves, right?
Yes.
We better know for sure what we're going to be doing, because we don't want to cause a problem that's going to screw us later in our information pipeline.
And let's say, I don't know, you're at the regional round. And you say, hey, Coach, we hear you're talking to Chris Del Conte about taking the Texas job. There is no Texas job.
Why would we be talking about a job that's not open?
Exactly. Squashes it. You're not going to get anything out of them. But again, the job is open as of 8 hours beforehand. We're hearing a lot of rumors about you maybe taking it. Now you got something.
Yeah. So
that's how it works.
It does. And yes, in a perfect world, when you hear something, you run off and start talking about, here's what I'm hearing, but it's not that easy. And there is a process to it. And I'm old school. As Jay Phillips comes in, here's the handoff, sponsored by Little Pigs on Alpine Road.
Did you say you're old or old school? I missed that.
It's both anymore. It's both.
Headphones were cutting out.
I'm one of those guys that, again, I'll never forget the young Terry Ford working at a radio station when you had news departments. You remember this, Jay, at radio stations?
I worked at one. In fact, for a little while, Terry, I was the news department at a radio station.
Were you?
True story.
You were everybody? You were the newsroom? Were you the newsroom?
Basically, yes. Yes.
Well, I remember
for about 3 years, yes.
As news director, yes. These guys would come in, reporters, look, I heard this thing, you go, you got three sources? No. How many you got? One. Go get two more. Don't come see me till you have two more.
Yeah, my buddy told me.
Yep. I have a neighbor.
Yeah.
And it was
the
like
Ferris Bueller thing.
Yep. You got to have three sources, what it used to be, Tyler.
Yeah.
Now I think they say two. But it used to be three solid sources, or you couldn't run a story.
You just need to have them independent. That's all. I tell a story one time, and Steve Fink still gives me crap about it, which is fine. And I'm not really into the breaking news thing, but the rumor mill swirled, I don't know, 15 years ago about Bud Foster becoming Steve Spurrier's defensive coordinator. And I got three, and they were all independent. Two of them earned paychecks from that athletic department. And one was in our business, but was not based here. So I had three. I did my job. I had three. And I told my boss at the time, and we went with it. And what ended up happening is that Coach Beamer, Frank, just made sure Bud got a nice raise. But I mean, I did my job.
Right.
And I remember Fink, for years, they're like, hey, you hired me a defensive coordinator yet? And I was like, Fink, man. I was like, and like I said, too, two of the sources I had were from that
cross street.
Yeah. So, I felt good about it.
Well, sometimes you have three. Look, that story, like you say, what that did is got Bud Foster a raise.
Pretty much.
But Bud Foster, there were three sources that said he's coming to South Carolina, and then Frank went.
And they were independent. The two that worked in the athletic department were not people this was like sharing a cubicle.
Right. They weren't sitting next to each other at desks.
No.
So then Frank went, or Bud Foster might have went in and said, look, I'm going to South Carolina. And then Frank said, hold that thought for a minute. By the way, here's a suitcase. Open it up.
And I don't know that it was because of anything we did at 107.5 The Game, but I just, to your point, I, once I got the third one, because I got the first two, and I was like, let me make a call. I was like, hey. And they were like, yeah, that's what we're hearing. And I was
so
like.
So you had three.
Yeah.
And that's the way the business used to work. Now, and I don't understand this, guys. this whole need to be first. I don't care if you're first. Get it right.
Yeah.
I don't care about this. Oh, Adam Schefter had a first. What does that get you? Does that get you more in your contract negotiation?
Terry, you don't know they hand out gold stars for
Is that what it is?
reporting
Gold
first?
stars?
Yeah. Schefter, Woj, those guys just got a fridge full of them.
All over the.
Yeah, you guys. But speaking of which, did you hear our Gold Stars story from yesterday?
No.
The NCAA. If you basically rat out people inside your department for the NCAA, you'll get a gold star. They didn't say it'd actually be a gold star.
They really know how to motivate a guy.
Yeah, I was going to say, a gold star. Is that worth the beatdown you're going to get to rat people out?
I was sitting there reading it and looking at Elijah going, dude, I don't feel good.
Could you imagine walking into someone's office? How'd you get that gold star?
Yeah.
Oh,
I ratted you out.
Gave out inside information.
Hey, you better give me a bag or two if I'm going to be ratting people out. Forget gold stars. Jay's coming next with Elijah postgame show. Nice job, Tyler. We'll do it again tomorrow.